Okay, so wanted to thank everybody for joining today. So I'm Peter Bermel. I'm the principal investigator and co-director for SCALE. SCALE stands for Scalable Asymmetric Lifecycle Engagement. So my goal for today was to give you all a brief overview of SCALE and then talk about the RFS opportunity in detail and then see what questions you all may have. So we're going to keep going. So first of all, what is Scale? Scale is actually the leading US defense microelectronics workforce development public-private academic partnership. So what does that mean? That means we have both a consortium of universities, in fact, about 35 to 36 higher ed institutions, over 100 faculty, over 75 employers, and these employers come from both public sector, so government agencies, as well as the private sector, particularly the defense industrial base. And Scale collaborates closely with NanoHub as its online virtual infrastructure platform. We're primarily supported by Trust and Assured Microelectronics. Trust and Assured Microelectronics is focused on building a national network and involves all components of Department of War, as it's now called. And then we also work closely with Silicon Crossroads on the regional components, particularly in Indiana, Michigan, and Illinois. Today, I'll be talking about the national support from Trust and Assured Microelectronics. And so all the opportunities will be geared towards that space going forward. There's a broad range of opportunities that we provide to our students. That goes all the way from K-12 in terms of offering targeted modules and outreach opportunities to community college and then to bachelor's programs that offer both rigorous core curricula, different technical verticals across universities that I'll talk about in a minute, as well as like experiential and hands-on learning opportunities, targeted scholarship opportunities, internships, and full-time jobs for students, as well as the ability to go to continuing education programs, which are run by MEST, and graduate programs such as CSME. So there's actually a wide range of levels that we're covering within Scale. Now, in terms of technical areas, we're specifically soliciting opportunities in the request for solutions for trust and assured microelectronics. Those are the areas that are in the lighter color here. So that includes particularly from chip design, which is called SoC, System on Chip, to fabrication. That includes areas like compound semiconductors, to back-end of line manufacturing, such as heterogeneous integration advanced packaging, to testing, so specifically in this case, radiation hardened electronics testing and environment understanding. And then at the, I guess you could say, most abstract level, then trusted artificial intelligence, which officially is called ESS, Trusted AI, but we typically would just refer to it as Trusted AI. We also collaborate with Silicon Crossroads Hub to develop knowledge, skills, and abilities and courses, particularly targeted at the Midwest region, that have interesting interactions and intersections with our core areas for trusted assured microelectronics. And then the commons areas are in this darker color here. That includes AI hardware, which of course interacts with trusted AI, includes secure edge IoT and commercial leap ahead technologies, which touches on both the design side and the fabrication side. Also includes specific areas like 5G, 6G communications, and electronic warfare that typically depend heavily on compound semiconductor manufacturing, but of course also tie into broader packaging space. And then finally, quantum. So that gives you an idea of all the tech areas we cover. But from this point forward, we'll be mostly focused on these areas, just for your awareness. Now, what is the request for solutions asking for? First, we're trying to expand the scale model to increase the workforce capacity across defense microelectronics engineering roles. So If you're looking at non-engineering roles such as business development or perhaps you know maybe studying the concept of scientific history, then that would not fall within the scope. We're also trying to strengthen the academic pipeline by coordinating curriculum development and talent pathways that are aligned to the educational standards. Our staff member, Jill Folkerts, here is the lead on developing those educational standards and managing the whole process. So she can also help answer questions if you have those. And then third, we're trying to increase our capacity to deliver defense industry aligned work ready training aligned to competency frameworks in testing, systems engineering, and supply chains. Fourth, we're trying to develop experiential learning pathways that eventually lead to employment in defense microelectronics sector in the US. That includes both Department of War, other government agencies, and defense industrial base. Fifth, we're trying to support student recruitment, retention, mentoring, and placement into these roles, aligning with number 4. And then finally, generate performance data to inform future investment decisions and consortium scaling. The tasks that we're asking all performers to speak to in their proposals are these. And there are more details in the RFS, but I'll just kind of talk about them high level and then would refer you to RFS for all the fine details. But first of all, like we need student recruiting retention. So of course, workforce development has to start with recruiting. But it's not good enough to recruit somebody for one day if they don't stay in this area. So that's why retention is equally emphasized here. And that includes a variety of methods. We have established some best practices in this space, and we're looking to you all to think creatively about how can we recruit at your location, okay? And then second, we're looking at curriculum alignment and development, which I spoke to you a little bit before, but it's really about can you leverage some of the national resources that we're developing for scale at your home institution and build it into your curriculum in a way that makes sense for your technical area. We're not expecting people to just directly adopt all curriculum we've ever developed, but we're trying to actually focus on how do we create educational standards and I guess you could say meet minimum requirements from the defense and security perspective. And each tech area is different, so I just want to be mindful that there's no one size fits all answer, but we have a variety of models that we've developed in that space. Third, on research and workforce engagement, that's really about going beyond just the curriculum to include more hands-on experiential learning opportunities as well. And many of you are subject matter experts in your field, so we're looking for you to leverage your expertise in writing these proposals and figure out how do your unique research capability align to one of the tech areas and assist with workforce engagement. So that includes both direct mentoring of students for research projects, but also includes helping to place them with internships at companies that may have need for people with the capabilities they've developed working with you all. On task 4, consortium participation, that's really looking at are you able to work well with the other universities in the program? So not just Purdue, the university consortium manager, but also the other ones, especially in your tech area. We're not expecting you to necessarily take a leading role to start off with, but if you're willing to work with the other teams, then that's extremely helpful and important. If you are unwilling to engage, then that makes it much more difficult for us. Task 5 on financial management is primarily about will you be able to deliver the financial reporting, and that includes like starting from creating a budget and a spend plan to updating on a monthly basis and then submitting bills on a timely basis. And many research one universities are already well set up to do this sort of thing. But we know that it's not equally easy for every institution, but we do need to ask you all to report the financials. And then on the metrics and reporting, that's really the non-financial side of metrics. So that includes things like the number of students that you have, number of placements, etc. And we already have a framework in place that you all can leverage to do that. But you do have to do some things to help us, like answer questions that we send to you on a regular basis. I'll give you that timeline in a few minutes. So in terms of preferential factors, okay, let me explain this because this may be non-obvious. So some of our government sponsors have asked for these specific locations and institutions within 50 miles of these areas to be prioritized. That doesn't mean that other US institutions cannot apply, but basically, Department of War headquarters, also known as Pentagon, obviously is a key site, as well as other sites in DC area. There are also a number of prime contractor facilities. I've listed a few here, but of course, there are others, but I think you could start with these, like Lockheed Martin. Um, there's also a number of NNSA FFRDC facilities. Hopefully, you all know these acronyms, but I can clarify if not. Um, there's also a number of Department of Navy labs and field activities, such as NSWC Crane. And then there's heavy ion test facilities like the Texas A&M Cyclotron Institute, although there are several throughout the country, as you may know. Okay, so those are ideal locations from the sponsor perspective. In terms of institutional capacity, I would argue this is even more important. So this is looking at, are you in a position to potentially be an effective performer for scale? And so this means including the student population that you would have at least 3,000 students at your university. That doesn't mean you have to recruit 3,000 to your project, but the idea is that there's a deep enough pool of students that it would be possible to grow your program. And then we're looking for ABET accredited programs in one of at least electrical and computer engineering and or mechanical engineering. The reason why we're emphasizing engineering so much is because the vast majority of Scale students are studying engineering, and then these are generally the two largest areas at most colleges of engineering across the US. We also are looking for strong departments in science and math. Obviously, without a science and math as foundation, it's very hard to be a good engineer. And then we also want faculty expertise in key technical areas relating to the tech areas I talked about. That could include things like microelectronics testing, systems engineering, and supply chains. We're also looking that you have lab infrastructure that's ready to be used by students. You also have been involved ideally in workforce development missions in microelectronics. You also have the ability to execute federal agreements, and you have some sort of partnership or track record working with Department of War, other government agencies, and defense contractors. So you're sensitized to the national security space, if you will. Another factor that we would consider positive is if you have ABET accredited programs in materials engineering and or chemical engineering. But that's not strictly required. We would need at least one of electrical or mechanical engineering. If there's no engineering programs at all, we found that it may be difficult to create a fit. In terms of deliverables, there are a couple that we really want to emphasize. And since Jill is here, she can help answer questions you may have. But basically, that includes a list of courses that would be aligned to your selected technical vertical standards and a plan for achieving full coverage. Now, the due date is TBD because it will depend on when the contract is awarded. So that would be negotiated if we move forward. And then in January, we plan to have a curriculum resource be uploaded. And probably, given where we are in the calendar year, that would be leveraging resources that you've been already working on that are related to the tech area, right? So if you've taught some courses in radiation hardening, that those would be good candidates for those sort of curriculum resource uploads. we're not expecting you to just start from scratch and build lots of new content. I realize that takes a while. In terms of reporting requirements, we do quarterly reports to our sponsors, and that includes both narrative and financial data. So we generally will reach out to you to ask for uh, updated narrative once a quarter and then financially once a month. We also collect data from organizations about twice a year. Now, of course, if we don't have you under contract in July 31st, this won't apply to you. And then for the final financial report, then that usually is for a period of performance that goes through end of March 2027, and then would be due within 60 days of that time, which is around May 31st, 2027. And that would be handled usually by your sponsor program office or equivalent thereof at your university. Now, in terms of what you need to submit, I'll go over it really briefly. And then there's first a cover page that would have your technical point of contact and contact info. And we listed here what contact info we need. So definitely need your email. We also want a contractual point of contact with similar types of contact information so that if we're able to move towards an award, then we can get in touch with them. We also need the institution name and address for sponsor programs going along those lines. And then we need to know what tech area you're putting yourself into. And again, as I explained, there's only these tech areas can be applied to at this point because we don't have additional funding to add in the commons areas. So this is entrusted in assured microelectronics. In terms of the period of performance, as I mentioned, the base period will be time of award to 3/31/27. Option periods are at the discretion of the government. So obviously, we would like to keep people going past 3/31/27, but technically it's not guaranteed and it will depend on performance and availability of funds. But obviously, if you get off to a strong start, that will definitely help. In terms of selection criteria, these are the key things that we're looking for. First, technical merit and feasibility. So that includes, is your organization capable of performing workforce development at a high level? Does it meet the institutional capacity requirements? Do you have people on your team with technical expertise in the tech area that you selected? And is your plan feasible under the amount of resources that you have? Second, how strong is your plan? So essentially, does it look like it has a likelihood of success? Will it have meaningful impact? And will it help us fulfill some of our key goals or scale? So again, you can look at the slides again. I think we'll be posting them so you can review in more detail. Third, is it aligned with the educational standards? And you can look at the educational standards at this link, and we'll provide these to you later. There's also linked in the RFS if you haven't looked at it already. And that's basically where you can look at all the educational standards that we have right now. So hopefully you all can take a look at that before you finish writing and submitting. I already mentioned institutional capacity, strengthen partnerships with DOW and DIB. That's definitely a factor. If you've never even talked to anybody at DOW, like including like Air Force or Navy, etc., hopefully you have some industry partnerships with the defense capability. You can also look at the Scale website and then go to partners to see the full list of our partners. So you can get all the options for partnership. And there's, as I mentioned, like 70 plus employers. So it's very likely most institutions that are of meaningful size and research capacity have worked with at least one, probably many more than one, but at least one is very likely. And then, of course, as I mentioned, you must be able to recruit and retain US students in these microelectronics areas. And you need to show cost realism and readiness for compliance with government requirements. Okay, so that's kind of the key set of criteria. Obviously, if you meet these all to some extent, that's a good thing, but that also doesn't guarantee an award. So basically going into the authority section, This would be a OTA contract, which stands for Other Transaction Authority. This has become more common in government contracting over the last few years. And the government has reserved the right to make one or multiple words or even 0 words if they are not satisfied with any of the responses. Um, they also reserve the right to negotiate the scope of funding prior to the award and award follow on efforts that are statutorily allowed if they choose to do so. So that means that there are a lot of things that could happen, right, in very informal terms. So hopefully good things will happen. So to the extent that you submit a strong proposal that aligns with their goals, the more likely good things will happen, especially if you can execute subsequently on that. There's also, just for your awareness, government purpose data rights that apply to curriculum materials, training frameworks, performance data, and associated deliverables. And we're also sharing materials like curriculum across the SCALE consortium. So I just want you all to be aware of that going in. So if you propose to share a specific piece of content, you should check that there's no issues with IP or whatever on your side. Because we obviously don't want to pull in IP that's not able to be shared. For government participation, you should be aware that compared to some other projects like you might have had with NSF, they're much more involved. So they can be involved in technical and programmatic reviews. They can participate in governance of the consortium, including checking in with both the leadership of Scale as well as individual universities. They can also review performance data, and they can suggest coordination with other Scale awardees or even non-Scale DUW performers, if that makes sense. So just final point here that I want to share is that the submissions are due on July 10th by the end of the day. And you should email them to me. This is my email. And then please copy Miss Brandy Hosler at bhosler@Purdue. The reason we're asking for this is twofold. First, to ensure that there's both a technical and contractual person on our side receiving these communications. And then B, because we want to make sure that if one of your emails goes into our spam folder, hopefully not, then at least the other person will get that. So we have some backup redundancy. Now, of course, if you find that I and Brandy have not acknowledged your submission, please feel free to check afterwards after the due date. But we will be, working asynchronously, so it may not be acknowledged right at midnight. But if you can give us like a day or so, that would be good. Okay, so let me just stop there and see if you have any questions. Okay, there's some in the chat. Okay. One was, are the slides available after the webinar so I can share with my colleagues? Joe, if that's okay with you, I would definitely strongly recommend posting both these slides and the recording after this. So I think Joe will assist us with that, but we'll get it out there. Okay. Then second question, is there a recommended funding range or typical budget level that should be considered? So for your awareness, the typical amount that institutions get per year is around 175K. In this case, we realize that it's less than a year, but you can still target a similar amount through March 31st, 2027. And of course, if you find that slightly more is necessary, you're welcome to propose that. If you propose like millions of dollars in year one, then unfortunately it's very unlikely that you'll get the full amount, just to be frank with you. But I mean, you can always try. I don't want to say it's impossible to propose more, but I think just keep in mind 175K per year is typical for the participating consortium members per tech area. Okay. And then third question, are indirect costs allowable under this effort? And should institutions use federally negotiated indirect cost rates? Yes. So in short, you should plan to use standard indirect cost structures and agreements in estimating your budget. Now, keep in mind, we're not asking for a very detailed budget. So you don't have to um, get every penny right. But at the same time, when you write your proposal, keep in mind that Um, well, some federal sponsors have asked for like lower F&A rates, like 15%, et cetera. Um, that's not like the controlling guidance for scale. So nothing like that is going on here at this point. If that changes for some reason, we'll notify you, but we've been on kind of like a standard federally negotiated indirect cost agreement going back to the beginning in 2020. Okay. Now, next question is from what sponsors will the OTAs be issued? Will it be issued directly or through Purdue Scale as pass-through? Okay. Yes. So basically, the answer is the second one. So basically, when Purdue acts as the consortium manager, that means that prime contract between Department of War is with Purdue, and then Purdue will subcontract to the other academic partners that we're working with. And so that's been our established structure and what we anticipate going forward. Thank you for the question. Okay, does anybody else have questions? Okay. Should I have to submit the budget by July 10th, 2026? Right. Okay, so I think that if we decide to make an award, we'll actually ask for a detailed budget. But when you submit to us, we're asking for primarily cover page and technical proposal, but not a detailed budget. And the reason, honestly, is that we're trying to minimize the amount of extra headaches that you all have in writing a proposal. So we're expecting that in many cases, you'll mostly need technical people to write what we need for July 10th. And you should alert your sponsor programs office about this and make sure you have a good point of contact. But we're expecting that most of the follow-ups will be later to basically nail that down in terms of the exact budget details, et cetera. And like I said, since the government is reserving right to offer different number of awards, we don't want to have you pin down on the exact budget and then have that change later. But I'm just giving you a ballpark so you can like start planning appropriate level of effort. In this proposal, do we need to propose the amount requested, like the exact dollar amount? I definitely would suggest like a rough order of magnitude budget, but of course, be mindful that it could shift over time in terms of the exact amount available to each of the performers. But I would rather get like a ballpark number for like your effort because that helps with evaluating cost realism. But again, we don't expect you to be like working with your sponsor program office and doing like 10 rounds of budget revisions and getting every I dotted and T crossed and have like a line by line budget and exact modified total direct cost calculation, et cetera. Like that's kind of overkill at this point because we need to select the performers and then get that sorted out. And then another question was, you're not requiring a detailed budget. Do you need AOR signature, or should we consider this a pre-proposal? I mean, technically, this is a request for solutions, so it's not a formal proposal that requires the AOR signature. However, you should submit it with the awareness and consent of your sponsor program office that they feel comfortable with you submitting this, that you're not like going way outside of what your institution would consider fair and appropriate for you to submit. But they don't need to give us a formal signature at this point. Now, keep in mind, like if we do select your project, then they will have to get involved and they will have to sign off on this. So that's part of why I'm saying it should be at least something they would feel comfortable with. So it shouldn't be like you send it to them and they're like, there's no way this is even possible. So just keep that in mind when you write this. So try to like be somewhat realistic about what you're promising and planning. So anyway, but hopefully we're minimizing the bureaucracy by doing it this way. And then another question was, does the local DOW lab need to be part of Scale to be included as part of the RFS? Okay, so no, actually, that's fine. So just to be clear, uh, we're open to collaborating with other DOW entities, even if they're not listed as official Scale partners, because I think, like you, we recognize that there are many DOW entities in general, some of whom have bigger microelectronics footprints than others. So I'd argue we probably have some of the biggest ones, but that doesn't mean we have all of them. So we're open to including other DOW entities that we might not have on our partner list. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, here's one more. Do we need letters of support from partners? No, I mean, you don't need it right now. So, do you want to include letters of support? I mean, actually, keep in mind we limited it to 5 pages. So I would say only if you feel like that's part of your 5 page narrative that you want to include that. Otherwise, don't worry about including that at this stage. Hopefully, there will be some evidence to show that you work with these collaborators. Obviously, examples could include like a center website that explains your partnership or list of partners, could include joint publications, could include other documentation that you would place online. So we're open to a variety of pieces of evidence to show that you have a partnership. I would think in most cases, if there's like a deep partnership, there should be some evidence visible to the outside world in most cases. But if you're like, this partnership exists, but it's not documented for some reason, you should probably explain that in your narrative. Okay, so, but don't like worry about including letters unless you think it's absolutely part of that 5 page narrative. Um, okay, so again, like there's a question of what do you have to submit by July 10th? So if it's okay, I'll go back to that. All right, so hopefully you can see this. So this is again, proposal cover page. Again, this is just one page that just has mostly contact information and your institutional contact information and then your scale tech area. And then the technical write-up. Oh, did I skip that slide? Apologies if I skipped that. But essentially, the technical write-up will include like what you'll be doing for all of the project, and we'll speak to these selection criteria. So it's a 5 page technical proposal, essentially, that talks about what you're going to do to fulfill all the tasks and meet all these selection criteria. Okay, there was a follow-up question about the size of the award. And so again, the exact amount will depend obviously a lot on the period of performance, like if you're renewed for multiple years, but the initial time period through March 31st, 2027, we're expecting on the order of 175K. But again, we'd rather you give like a more realistic estimate instead of just give that number without thinking about it. Okay, so Jill has kindly linked to the RFS. So if you're missing any details about like what is due at what time, etc., then you can like look at that RFS and then review it in more detail. And I apologize if you all are like already well aware of this, but I just want to make sure we're answering all the questions. Okay, so thank you, Jill, for doing that. Are there any follow-up questions? Okay. So I'll give you 10 seconds to see if there are any more questions. If anybody has more questions, if you could either raise your hand or just type it in the chat.
I think I have a question.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Um, this is Rubai from Howard University. Are you going to entertain one proposal per institution or one more than proposal from the institution?
Okay. So I think that from our perspective, we'd rather have one proposal per institution. We didn't strictly require that in the RFS. So in principle, like if there's like four from Howard, that's okay. But reality is like we're not going to fund more than one. So just keep that in mind. So I think it's to your institution's advantage to consolidate proposals together. Like if you have multiple people interested, that's a good thing. But if you can work together in writing it, if you're aware of each other, that would be good. But I realize in some cases, some people may write stuff and you have no control over it. That's the nature of academia. So we're not going to penalize Howard if they submit more than one, but just keep in mind, we'd rather see one strong proposal than three decent, but not like as excellent proposals, right? Because
Mhm.
it's not like one of those situations where you're just like buying a lottery ticket and more tickets you buy,
Mhm.
the better, right? Like it's actually a lot different. And we're trying to evaluate quality rather than quantity. Does
Yeah.
that answer your
Thanks.
question?
No, I appreciate that.
Okay, great. And then
Somebody.
Tony B had a question.
Yeah, hi, Tony Barsick from University of Vermont. Um,
Lou.
so one of the questions that I have is about the period of performance ending in March. Is throwing me off a little bit. Part of what I want to do is support students in some undergrad research and the curriculum analysis.
Sure.
If awarded, can I? How likely is the chance of renewal? If it's not necessarily renewed, I want to be able to find support for these students for that last month and a half of the semester. Um, yeah, so can you comment on that, on likelihood of renewal?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. And I can't guarantee anybody would be renewed. However, historically, like the vast majority of scale universities have been renewed year over year. And I also realize that cutting off funding mid-semester is very disruptive, so we don't want to do that lightly. I think the reality is Department of War requirements have put us on that schedule, so we're kind of forced to stay with that schedule, and we try to have smooth off ramps if we can, if it's absolutely necessary to discontinue a school. But historically, I would say vast majority of schools have continued year over year. However, not 100%. So there's no guarantee that they'll continue. And that's ultimately driven by the government sponsors of like whether uh, institution continues. But a couple of key factors would be going back to some of the earlier things that we said, like for tasking. So let me just explain how these tasks actually influence renewal. Um, for task one on student recruiting, if you're unsuccessful in recruiting any students, then that immediately creates a red flag for us. Doesn't mean that we expect you to be as large as Purdue in terms of student enrollment, but there should be like some sort of growth trajectory. And we have historical data showing what new universities can do in a year. So that's kind of where we're benchmarking that. On curriculum alignment and development, people who are interacting with people like Jill on our team and corresponding about curriculum ideas have been, I guess you could say, viewed more favorably than those who just delete all of your emails. So that's another factor. Third would be on research and workforce engagement. Are you actually giving students meaningful experiential learning opportunities, or are you not really carrying any weight there? Consortium participation, same thing. Are you actually showing up to our annual meeting, or are you just not showing up, or like just saying you have more important stuff to do? Recognizing, obviously, not everybody's available for every event, but the expectation is for annual meeting, you or a delegate would be available. And presumably if it's like a large enough institution, there should be a number of faculty and staff who could serve that role. And then on financial management, if you never report your spending or never report any other metrics or accomplishments, then it's also very hard to justify continuing a school because then from the university consortium management perspective and sponsor perspective, the outcomes are very negligible, right? So that's another factor that would weigh against continuing. However, if you can actually do all these things effectively, then that means that you would have a much higher chance of getting renewed. And so the schools that do the best in these topic areas and tasks are usually the ones that continue year over year. And like I said, vast majority have continued. So it's not like impossible to continue. Doesn't mean you have to be the best school in all of scale, but it means you need to meet some minimum standards at least. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, great. Any other questions? If you can raise your hand if you have any questions, that'd be helpful. Okay, so I don't see anything right now. So let me just summarize to say that, first of all, I really appreciate that you all are interested in applying to join Scale. We're excited about the potential to add new universities in the US. I think many of the universities on this call I'm aware of from various contacts. So certainly nice to see like some very visible programs trying to join our team. Now, if you have follow-up questions, in interest of fairness, like we're trying to put together like I guess you'd say broadly shareable materials. So if you're okay with having that information shared, you can still email us for a few more days. I'll probably have more limited access to email personally after July 1st, this Wednesday. So I'd recommend any follow-up questions, try to send them by Wednesday this week, if at all possible. Otherwise, it might be hard to get back to you quickly, but I will try. So yeah, please don't save all the questions for July 10th at 11:05 p.m. So I'm sure you all are more responsible than some of our students, but just keep in mind that last minute questions won't necessarily be accommodated. Then there's a final question. Okay, number of awards is set. No, actually, it's not set. We do have a potential maximum if we get all the funding that we're anticipating, but we do already have in hand enough funding to award at least several new universities that the government wants to do so. So again, government is reserving the right to not award anything if they don't like the proposals, but I can tell you just from direct experience that I know we have money to fund new schools, which is a very important first step. But we have to convince the government that we should actually fund you. So that's why we need you to write good technical proposals to be competitive. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so not seeing any other questions, I'm going to just stop there and invite you all to write strong proposals and wish you luck in your applications. And thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.